Hello, my name is Ken, and I'm presenting on behalf of group The Knowledge Associates, and I'm excited to share with everyone what we've accomplished to date. We've got 4 major lessons learned that I wanted to highlight. The first item is the familiarity with your project management information system and tools. We would have been much more effective at creating the work that we've done if we had a much more extensive background in Microsoft Project, and there were some times where we had to heavily rely on the tutorials included and rely on other information on the internet for learning how to use Microsoft Project more effectively. The second item is time management. While we had quite a few weeks between Milestone 1 and Milestone 2, where we were drafting the initial work breakdown structure, there was a more compressed time frame between this milestone and the previous one, where we had to start assigning resources to tasks and coming up with time frames for each of the tasks in more detail. This discrepancy in the time frames really does reflect what we would expect to see in a real world scenario where a certain amount of time has been scheduled for coming up with the initial planning aspects of the project materials and the project management plan and the WBS. But then in actuality, when it comes time to implementing changes or when changes start occurring during the thick of the project, we would expect a lot less leeway and a lot less time there. So we feel like there was that this discrepancy in time was positively reflects what we would expect to see with a real project. Which brings me into item number 3, the value of upfront information. It's important to do as much requirements gathering as possible upfront, so that way you can try to identify where misconceptions and misalignment exists between different stakeholders. So when we see various requirements items changing in the most recent example or the most recent case information, we would expect to see similar changes in the real world. So one change I would like to draw on is the emphasis on inventory management processes. In our original work breakout structure, we did have time slotted for process optimization, process changes, but we didn't specifically call it inventory management. So doing as much requirements gathering upfront in order to identify potentially missed areas is going to be very helpful, but shouldn't stop the project from carrying forward. And that brings me into number 4, changing requirements. It's important to stagger the requirements gathering throughout the project from an agile perspective, as well as to have as much requirements gathering upfront as possible so that you can try and figure out, again, when and where requirements might possibly change. These are some of the work breakdown structure dictionary items that we've put together. So this is the example format and verbiage. This is the verbiage that we would use. We still have placeholders for which departments would be involved and for which resources would be assigned, but this is what we're looking at. For resource assignments and costs, we've assigned a lot of ourselves, Ali West, as the resource for most of the project management, project planning items. An interesting idea here would be to rely heavily on any business analysts that are involved, so that way you can make sure that you're leveraging their business analyst expertise. We've included quite a few resources and items under the new contract. A question here is what level of Wilmots needs to be involved here? How heavily involved do the chief officers need to be, and how much can you rely on just the working staff of like the middle management layers? So taking a look at, for instance, the project team leads for IT security or just security in general. How much can we rely on them when we're trying to identify what the requirements are? Here's the high-level overview of the order and delivery systems. Something to note is that we haven't finished assigning all of Wilmot's internal resources to this, but we will expect to rely heavily on Drone Tech's staff for this item. When we're taking a look at participating customers, we haven't had an opportunity to finish assigning resources to these items, but we do have time frames built out. I'll get more into that when we take a look at the Gantt chart for it. For the initial project charter and the initial WBS, we had the charter and the plan starting before January 1st, but we've changed that now so that way the charter is being developed starting of January. We think that this does also reflects better the case information as well as reality, where you would plan to start as much planning before a project, but that's not always possible in actuality. And you can see here are the tasks for the new contract, the WBS and schedule, and the start of the online ordering system. The order and delivery systems are broken out into timelines here. You can see the timelines for the different tasks and how this is extending over to September. And since most of the engineering is happening in that time frame for items number 7 as well as for the marketing items, we're trying to do that before we need them in September, just because it's going to be different resources tackling those items. Okay, so any feedback is greatly appreciated, especially on these timeframes. Thank you for taking the time to watch our video.